Hello to everyone dialing in and welcome to our Power of the Cloud panel. I'm Mike, the organizer of this panel, and I'll be handing over to our moderator, James McLeod, shortly. Just a note on timekeeping, we'll be ending the webinar at 1:45, at which time we'll head over to the digital hangout. So without further ado, over to you, James.
Welcome to TechCity Connect, a day of tech, art and culture brought to you by Ditto, the B2B tech marketing practice. You're listening to our panel discussion, The Power of Cloud, Move to the Sky to Make Things Fly. With cloud computing in the current global environment playing a fundamental role in all our lives, it's easy for firms to think that they've got the cloud cracked. But are they making the most of its true potential? And are there aspects of cloud computing yet to be explored? Today we'll look at how firms are engaging the cloud from a variety of angles that could really change the way you, your teams, and your clients do business, especially when it comes to DevOps, digital transformation, team communication, and managing data. First, for some introductions. I'm James McLeod, Director of Community at Finos, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. I am joined this afternoon by Elizabeth Sepia, Chief of Staff of Legerity, James Cochran, CTO Finance Services at KX, and Peter Thomas, Principal Engineer, Corporate and Investment Bank at Deutsche Bank. Just a little on me. Being the Director of Community for the FinTech Open Source Foundation, I absolutely believe the transformation of financial services can only be fulfilled if open source in finance is embraced under the three pillars of contribution, consumption, and community. My focus is growing open source in financial services, which includes working with the Finos Cloud Service Certification Project that's creating a regulated framework of cloud services across Finos banking members, technology firms, and engineering contributors. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Elizabeth Sepia, James Cochran, and Peter Thomas, if you would like to introduce yourselves. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Ready? Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I am Chief of Staff at Legerity. We are a 5-year-old software company who provides cloud technology for very large enterprise customers for accounting. I have a background in technology, having worked at HP and OMX Nasdaq, and I also do a couple of boards. I sit on the board as the board director for digital transformation for a couple of.
Right, so we're having a few connection issues with Elizabeth. And so Mike, I know that you're listening in the background. I don't know if you've got access to a mobile to give Elizabeth a call and maybe get her dialing in. So in the meantime, let's go over to James Cochran, who I know is waiting on the line. So James, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thanks very much, James, and thanks for having me on the panel. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm CTO of Financial Services at KX. At KX, we're a time series database and streaming analytics company. We operate predominantly in the financial services industry, and we're known for operating platforms with high volume, high velocity data. So we're in the sort of the electronic trading space, the risk management space, and anywhere where large volumes of typically streaming data need to be processed and analyzed. So as the CTO of that part of the business, I'm responsible for platform development and product development.
That's amazing, James. Welcome to the panel. And then finally, Peter Thomas from Deutsche Bank, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Hi, my name is Peter. I'm a principal engineer within the Corporate Investment Bank at Deutsche Bank. I've been working in financial services for about 20 years or so, last 3 or 4 years focusing on distributed systems, cloud-based architectures. I work in the CTO office in the Corporate Bank and Investment Bank, and I run our cloud engineering program with a focus on cloud native architectures and DevOps.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Peter. And when Elizabeth returns to the
Hi,
webinar,
I've come back. I've dialed in.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for returning. So Elizabeth, let's go back over to you to get an introduction from yourself.
I'm Elizabeth Sepia, and I am Chief of Staff at Legerity. We are a software company that provides accounting solutions often to fairly large global enterprise clients. And I have a background in technology companies. I work for Hewlett Packard and OMX NASDAQ. And I also actually sit on the board as a digital transformation skill for some social housing association and a college.
That's brilliant. And thank you very much for sorting out your technical issue. It's good to have you back on the panel. And this is a note to the audience. This webinar is being recorded, and there'll also be some time at the end for any audience questions that you may have. So if you do have any questions, please use the question form provided on GoToWebinar. And so explaining the format, this afternoon I'll give an overview on the topic, and then I'll guide the panelists through a series of questions on their use of cloud within their organizations and within respective industries. And then at the end of the webinar, we will close with a closing comment from each of our participants. Okay, so getting straight into the discussion now. We know the topic of digital transformation and cloud isn't new, but the current situation of teams working from home and businesses being remotely distributed is. To some extent, digital transformation has been accelerated and we all need to adapt faster. Here's a few stories, stats and facts to let you know how firms have been migrating to cloud infrastructure and services and how COVID-19 has accelerated the transformation. So moving on to our first slide, more than $1.3 trillion on IT spending will be affected by the shift of cloud in 2022. Global public cloud service market is projected to reach $266 billion in 2020. 83% of enterprise workloads will be in the cloud by 2020. 66% of enterprises already have a central cloud team or a cloud center of excellence. And COVID-19 to accelerate cloud adoption and compress the adoption curve from decades into a few years. And also the barriers are being removed in US financial services to accelerate cloud adoption. And as of March 2020, COVID-19 software as a service has increased Microsoft Teams to 44 million daily users, Zoom to 200 million daily users. Netflix has increased from 16 million to 26 million daily users. House Party and also Nextdoor has seen 73% growth. And so as you can see, cloud and cloud services has significantly accelerated since we've all started working from home and being distributed. So with this in mind, let's talk about the state of now and how does the cloud give your firm a competitive edge whilst allowing you to adapt to the global pandemic. And so let's go over to our panel with that first question. Let's go over to Peter.
Thank you. That's a really good question. I think, DB have been affected like every other organisation by the pandemic. We have 95% of our staff working from home at the moment, and I think we have had, compared to some of the other services that we've seen, we've had a seamless transition to working from home. As you would expect for most major organisations, there's a need for business continuity planning and things like that to be in place to allow the business to continue. And we frequently test the capacity of these things, but I don't think you ever test it up to this sort of scale. So it's been really positive from our point of view. We've been able to maintain business continuity. We've been able to effectively, seamlessly transition to majority at home or almost entirely at home working with little impact onto our business.
And over to you, Elizabeth, sorry.
No, a lot of people call me Liz. Yes, I think we're very like Deutsche. So we're a 5-year-old software company. So we are cloud native in everything we do. Actually, we have some on-premise clients, but we do try to encourage them to go cloud. So it's been pretty seamless. But I think the really interesting question is we can already feel that competitive edge And I think that's to do with the fact that we have customers who knew that, and we have prospects who knew that. And, you know, they've been able to turn to us and say, okay, look, we need to do this now. How can you help us? We have one large central market institution that was doing something on premise, and they said, okay, we want to go cloud, and we want you to start running workshops, and we want a dev environment, and we could do all that with about 2 weeks. So it's really good to be the presence where people know and have that confidence in your cloud skills.
And over to you, James.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a similar story here. You know, when the lockdown happened, you know, we were able to very quickly transition our global workforce to working from home. You know, we're pretty much at 100% of our staff working from home, and you know, things like access to environments, access to collaboration tools, and the tools you need to do your job. You know, all of those tools for us are in the cloud, and we're able to transition to home working very seamlessly. So that allowed, you know, our HR team and our pandemic committee, which was set up to really focus on the well-being of our staff. You know, it was never a question whether our staff could do their work, but we needed to make sure that we were looking after our people. So it was great that the cloud allowed us to focus on the areas that we really needed to focus on, rather than worrying about connectivity per se. So when we look at our competitive advantage, you know, our clients are running our systems in sort of mission critical environments within the investment banking arena, and it's critical that we're able to support them and access their systems in 24/7 environments. So that was enabled through cloud and collaboration.
So that's great. That's great to hear from all of you. So with firms accelerating into the cloud, how is this acceleration and growth having a positive effect on the innovation and growth of software and data? So maybe if we go to Liz first.
I think most of us know that we can release software more quickly, be more agile in the cloud. So I think this acceleration is all about the attitude of people towards using the cloud, and I think it's really fantastic. I was thinking before the meeting, we had a bid we put into one of the banks last year, and they asked us over 800 questions, and over 470 of them being about security, and we supplied 33 documents. And this is actually, many of them were about security. And there's just something different happening now. People are saying, okay, the cloud is actually safer for certain kind of stresses. You know, if we had a flood, if we have a pandemic, we now know that the cloud is safer in different ways. So it puts the security in a different perspective. So I think it's really helped this acceleration of an architecture that enables us to innovate, you know, virtually immediately. The crazy thing about it is it's always there, which can't be said for some of the on-premise systems.
And James, how is this acceleration having a positive effect on innovation and growth in your area?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, the big trend I think we see is that businesses now are really digitizing, and with that digitization it comes more software, more data, more applications generating data, and you know, ultimately people are looking for business insights in real time. So the cloud we see is the #1 place for streaming analytics, for example. New dev and new application development is taking place on the cloud from day one. And then, of course, there's the shift to the cloud, or the migration of existing or legacy applications to the cloud. So all of this is generating huge amounts of data as more and more operations are moving to the cloud. And I totally agree with Elizabeth. I mean, from a productivity perspective, and this is really important. You know, the bigger your organization is, some of our clients have thousands of developers. If you can improve every developer's productivity even by a few percent, you know, that aggregate it all up gives you a massive acceleration in time to market, going from idea generation to development to production gets a lot quicker.
That's great. And how are things changing in Deutsche Bank, Peter?
So interestingly, what James was just saying, we've had a bit of a buzzword at DB for a while called idea to production in a day, and we've been able to demonstrate that you can go from a sort of concept, right? So the big barrier to innovation is the ability for you to fail fast or to get fast feedback, and so if it takes you months to acquire hardware or to set up the services, it's a real dampener on innovation. It sort of discourages you from trying new things. And so what we've been able to see, both at Deutsche Bank, and I've done this at other organizations, where we've been able to develop prototype systems in hours instead of days or weeks or months. And that allows you, that sort of allows you to do two things, right? It encourages your innovation, and it also allows you just to explore things that might be useful. And instead of talking to people, instead of producing a PowerPoint to try and explain a concept, you can actually build a working piece of software, which is much easier for someone to use, someone to understand. And on the other point about data, I think what we're finding increasingly is that organizations have a lot of data that they don't use. And the real problem that they've had in the past is, how do you exploit that data to start to analyze it and start to gain insights from the data that you have? And one thing that we found in a lot of the activities that I've been involved in the past is that you don't have to build new things. You're basically analyzing the data you have, streaming it, and making it more available to the users, and they build the insights on top of that data. So it's not about building new systems, it's about sort of taking advantage of some of the things you already have.
So Peter, Elizabeth, and James, would you agree that it's essential for businesses to, would you agree that it's essential if businesses are to scale, that they need to be moving into the cloud? So what are your thoughts, Elizabeth?
I think that
would you say that?
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Elizabeth, would you say that it's essential for businesses to move into the cloud for them to scale?
Actually, it's very interesting. No, I don't think so. If you take what we do, we use grid technology, you can scale, you could do it on premise, but I'm not sure you'd win. I think if you want to do that and scale and then actually accelerate your growth at a lower cost in line with your competitors, I think then you wouldn't, you'd be able to do it, but you wouldn't be able to be the most successful player in the market. And the other thing, I thought your team, team working in the cloud, it's been very good, but we've had that for some time, and there are some companies that have talked about going back to people meeting more face to face. So there is some kind of balance. I was thinking about an example. I sit on the board of this college, and we have 1,300 kids that logged on to do schoolwork over Easter. We're about 12,000. So it's to put it in proportion. But I think they probably only did that because they've got a relationship with a teacher who's encouraging them. So I do think there is still room for both.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. James, do you have an example of examples of team agility and speed of delivery that's been improved by your current cloud position?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, team agility, I would look at two things there. I would look at collaboration across disparate teams and sometimes across different time zones and geographies. And then I would look to the way in which that team is carrying out their work. So, from a development point of view, we always look very closely at SDLC and making sure we're adopting agile practices, so that when we're going from idea to production, we're doing so in an iterative manner. And you know, if you leverage the tools that are just there in the cloud, you're onto a winner. I think you could when you're looking at on-prem systems and you're looking at building a lot of infrastructure from the ground up, you sort of lose agility, and you lose sort of connection to the business goal of what you're trying to do. So when our teams are leveraging the cloud, you know, that they can focus, they can just use the cloud for what it's good at, particularly that scalability, and focus on the business problem at hand.
So Peter, within Deutsche Bank, do you also have any examples where team agility has improved because of your cloud position?
So yeah, we've got a large scale adoption of a platform as a service frameworks that's based on top of OpenShift, and we've seen a massive adoption in that over the last couple of years. Exactly in the reason that I was saying is that you bring the developers closer to the ability for them to just provision their own infrastructure and to very quickly build up software. So you're removing all of the blockers that you have, and you're making it very, very easy for them to do stuff. And so, for example, we've done things similar to what James was just mentioning. We've been able to do things like through templating out the SDL, so the DevOps processes, and having tools to support doing that. You've been able to go from sort of 0 to a running application in about 15 minutes. It's purely by leveraging the sort of templated and blueprint applications that we've set up. So you sort of get past this stage of people thinking it takes a long time to build something. And just to give you another example, that not at Deutsche Bank, but another organisation that I've worked at, there's a regulatory requirement coming in called CSDR, which is around settlement effectiveness for equity trading, and we built a prototype system for them in a day. Getting data out of their legacy system, putting it through a streaming platform, and presenting them real-time analytics on that data. And they were amazed that you could actually do something in anything less than a month. And we did it because we took advantage of open source software and cloud platforms to build it. So these are the sort of things that you can do. You can do stuff in a day or a couple of days that previously would have taken you a long time. So yeah, we have lots and lots of examples of things like that happening.
That sounds great. It sounds like the bank truly is speeding up. So, okay, Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you on the next question. So moving into the future, how are you planning to leverage the cloud over the next 30, 60 or 90 days and beyond?
I find everybody starting to talk now. First of all, we all talked about the emergency COVID crisis, and now people are starting to talk about the new normal. And I think that we should, as a software company, and I do, a fair amount of work in business development, I think we need to think about how we can take advantage of the new normal and really look at servicing this greater openness to the cloud than there might have been just, before COVID. We've already had a few discussions on the stuff that Peter was talking about. We have everything sitting in the cloud, we can pre-configure, and we can start showing customers in a day, or often we do something, within a couple of weeks. And we really need to think about that. And we've started thinking, okay, let's just separate out the modules and do small enhancements for them in much shorter, smarter apps. The other thing I had a thought, I think it's worth going back through our on-premise customers actually, and promises and prospects, and really thinking about, is that really what they want? Having been through this experience, is that really the right architecture for them to choose? Because we've had, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we were closer to 50-50, and now we're nearer to sort of 80-20 cloud. And so, people are moving, but there are still some that have stayed on premise, and we know we can provide a much better service if we get them up into the cloud.
And James, how's your cloud position going to shift over that same timescale over the next 30, 60, 90 days?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we're going to continue to work with our customers to help them in their cloud journey. The cloud migrations can, particularly big organizations, can be very very long programs with dozens or even hundreds of applications to migrate over. So we've got to look at phased approaches for that, and we're helping them migrate significant amount of data over, as well as applications. Over the next 36 to 90 days, a lot of customers are going to go live with some of their real-time applications for us in the cloud, and we'll be working with them to keep an eye on the future. One of the common themes we're seeing is that most customers want to have a strategy around having a multi-cloud environment and also hybrid cloud environments. So we're working with our customers on those things over the coming months.
So Peter, keeping that same question in mind, I want to actually ask you a slightly different question. So do you think digitally transforming banks need to rethink their risk profiles in order to move faster and adapt to COVID-19? So in effect, in order for us to adapt, is there a slight change that the banks need to go through in order for us to really, move forward and get into the cloud a bit quicker?
So yeah, well, I think so. What's happened is, when you look at the sort of the controls and the policies that banks have in place, these have been built up over tens of years of infrastructure and software development on premise, and in some cases, some of these are very difficult to work back as to say, why do we have them? In some cases, and to work out what is the real origin of these the policies. And so it's sometimes relevant that you have to sort of think again about, do we go back to the start and look at actually what are the underlying policies and things that we're trying to comply with. So we as an organization, we have to comply with a set of regulations and policies that are set by various regulators, but these are quite difficult to connect to the actual controls and things that we put in place. And so whilst moving to the cloud, you have an opportunity, because basically you've got to rethink the majority of them anyway, and there's an option in this that you can start to think about, are there lighter weight or alternative ways of managing these? So for example, that the majority of the cloud providers provide automated mechanisms for managing the architecture and the configuration of your services in the cloud. So all the major cloud vendors provide policy processing that will automate a series of checks that you would previously have had to do manually. And what this means is that you can encode the policies into the platform. And so you make it much more straightforward for application development teams to conform to policy, because the policy is part of the platform. But in order to do that, you then need to review what those policies are and to go through the process and change your processes. All of the original processes you might have had about data protection or security or architecture review, these previous processes that used to have a sort of a waterfall process in your application development will all change, because you don't need them anymore. They'll disappear. They'll be encoded into the platform, and effectively you're removing them from the process. So it's an important thing to think about, because you're effectively fundamentally changing the way that you develop your software.
So James and Elizabeth, do you have an opinion on how banks might need to change their risk profiles?
James, I don't know if you do, I do. Shall I go first?
Go for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. When I was thinking about Peter, when he was talking, it's not really that they're going to change their risk profile, is it? They're still going to have to keep safe. But really, it's about having the skill and the understanding to find out what's the right way to do these things now, and then put in place, as Peter's described, a different set of processes that are more appropriate to the kind of architectures you can have in the cloud, and then to communicate really with the
senior executives about why that gives them the same level of risk mitigation that they might have wanted previously. And obviously, whatever they had in place before probably wasn't giving them appropriate risk mitigation for something that looks totally different. So that's really my sort of thinking of how I would answer that question. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And what about yourself, James?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when it comes to risk profiles within the banking world, I suppose you've all sorts of risks. But if we look at it, so like technology risk, operational risk, cybersecurity risk, I think the risk profiles probably remain the same. But the policies and the tools available to people within the bank, as Peter was saying, those are the things that will change and are changing, from what we can see. So I think it's important to make sure that when an organization is moving to the cloud, that doesn't mean that the policies need to be completely rewritten, but for certain tooling and methodologies need to be updated, so that you can meet the current risk profiles and make sure you're doing everything in a safe way.
Okay, so as we adapt to COVID and start making faster decisions, I'd actually heard that there's been a 667% increase in phishing and fraud. So Elizabeth, how do we strike a balance between moving fast and keeping safe? And how do we maintain a security duty of care?
So that's a really interesting question. Sitting as a board member in a couple of businesses, I would say that we always focus on safe, and we don't balance it. We look at a risk and we say, okay, what impact can it have, and how have we mitigated it? And if I look at what we do, with the cloud, we look at every step in our software development life cycle. We look at how we're monitoring. We look at our incident engine, and we keep them really current, and we make sure that we are every known intrusion, we are aware of, and we're reacting as fast as we can. But what we don't do is we don't say that this prevents business. And I think there was more of an attitude before that keeping safe in the cloud was preventing people from actually doing stuff. And what I really like about COVID, it's like, what are we keeping safe from? Before we were keeping safe from cyber risk, but now we want to keep safe. We want to keep 30 million unemployed out of 155 million in the US. We really, the world has changed so much that I think it has to go into context in a different way.
So, Peter, I was actually thinking, do you think it's the banks that need to look at the way that they deal with security, or do you think it's the cloud providers that also need to change their position in order for us to be able to move fast?
So I think it's a bit of a combination of the two. So there are certain things that cloud providers don't provide in general that the banks would like to have. So for example, a good example is like bring your own key, encryption of data. They don't universally support this for all of their services. So and that's something that banks generally would like control of. So there is some movement that's perhaps needed for some of the cloud vendors for some of their services like that. But I think also there is that as Elizabeth was saying, I think the majority of it is knowing the right way to configure your services within the cloud. The issue with the cloud is there's so many different options if you by default, that it's very easy to misconfigure something if the controls and things aren't in place. But what's really interesting and exciting is that the security is now being thought of in the same way that testing was thought of in software development like maybe 10 years ago. So the move towards automated testing and the move to the sort of whole team approach of testing, rather than you have a testing team and a development team, and the development team don't think about testing at all. That was 10 years or 15 years ago thinking. And the same thing is happening now with security. So what I've seen is the CISO organization that generally most big organizations have is now starting to work very closely with the product teams. And we have CISO staff embedded in building our cloud platforms, and they are educating the product teams about secure software development. And this is it's the same type of change, right? We're introducing security now as an aspect of software quality, and that's something we didn't have before. And we have tooling now. There's a number of there's a new movement which is called DevSecOps, which is a sort of extension of DevOps, which is a set of tooling that exists to support this and to provide various different automation tools that can help enforce those security controls. So I think we're starting to think of security as a sort of first-class concern in the way that we didn't in the past.
Thank you very much. And James, I was wondering if you could help me answer this question. So can you explain from a KX point of view how cloud can either save or make firms money, in the next 30, 60, 90 days, to deliver to the point of need or at scale?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of organizations will need to burst computing capacity over the next 30, 60, 90 days. If you look at the markets, they're turbulent and they're volatile, and there's more data flowing through systems, and rather than procuring an extra server or extending your infrastructure on premise, the cloud gives you a cheap way to scale to burst your compute capacity over the next couple of months. And in terms of saving money, the cloud platforms offer so many different types of pricing models when it comes to storage, compute, memory, and in particular, you can get very, very cheap storage on the cloud, depending on your appetite for performance. So there's plenty of trade-offs there that you can choose between, and spinning up and spinning down applications. When you're not using your systems, you can turn them off overnight and only pay for what you use. So certainly there's savings mechanisms there if you're using the cloud in the right way. But I think the real opportunity is slightly longer term, as going back to that theme of adopting the cloud to enhance and accelerate innovation, and rather than sort of lifting and shifting applications and saving a little bit of money when you're not using them, all of a sudden you can start building applications with cloud native architectures, and that should help firms, I believe, make more money over the longer term.
Right, brilliant. Right, so we've accelerated through this webinar really quickly, and so I'd like to end with this final third question, which is how should firms move forward with cloud adoption from your own experience and observations of the industry? And that one will go to Elizabeth first.
Well, we are a back office service, so we provide accounting at the back end, and I think that there's a lot we can do that sort of flows from the front end work that's been done. Many of our customers, insurers, banks, they've all put in wonderful cloud front ends for their customers, and I think it's made really significant change to what the user interface looks like. But I think, as Peter was touching on, the value comes when you can actually service that end to end. You've got a single data flow, you've got a complete picture, you can be really accurate in your responses, and then you can layer data and artificial intelligence and bots. You can grow all those applications by having the flow going front to back in a seamless manner through a cloud or a hybrid cloud. So for me, that's really the essence of the digital transformation and the customer journey. But I think particularly for us in accounting data, you get a tremendous value when you get your regulatory data, your accounting data, everything feeding off the same data, and people in the front office are making the decisions on what people in the back office are looking at. So some of those movements, I think, are really valuable.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And James, from your own experience, how should firms move forward?
I think it's important to look at cloud adoption as a journey. You know, we don't see it as a lift and shift that happens over you know, the course of a few weeks or months, and then that's that journey over. So adoption is something that needs to be thought through. Like Peter was saying, you know, there's policies, methodologies, tooling, and processes within organizations that'll need to be updated to truly leverage cloud as you go through your adoption journey. I think multi-cloud environments are absolutely going to be highly relevant for most organizations, and hybrid cloud environments. So I would say to bear all of that in mind, and really when you're adopting the cloud, think about the new architectures that you can build into your applications from day one.
And over to you, Peter. What are your views?
I think, well, firstly, I'd echo what the other two people have already said, but I think one of the key things for me is the cloud is just a platform. It's an enabler for your product development. It's not really, it's not a silver bullet to what you want to do. There's a need for thinking about what opportunity the cloud would provide you and building your products around those opportunities. So really, and James was mentioning about this, using cloud as lift and shift is economically possible, but usually not that good. But really, the definition of I've moved to cloud is a very woolly one. So it can mean anything from that point of view. But really, the benefit comes from taking advantage and leveraging these services that you get through cloud that perhaps you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. So this is either about scalability, as we've talked about, or elasticity, or about using services that you wouldn't yourself be able to develop or build on top of. So there's a lot of advanced analytical software, AI, ML type support in the cloud platforms, which to build up yourself would take a lot longer. So there's a whole tranche of opportunities there that wouldn't exist otherwise. So you have to sort of think carefully about what are the products that I'm looking to develop and how am I going to take advantage of the cloud platform to do that.
That's great. And so looking at the time, I'd like to say that I've really enjoyed this session. And to round off, let's have one closing comment from James, Elizabeth, and Peter. If there's one thing that you would like the audience to take away from today's discussion, what would that be? And let's start with James.
Sure. My takeaway would be to think about cloud adoption over the short, medium, and long term. The short term, there's definitely some great opportunities to be had, but if you're strategic about it, thinking about it over the long term, you can look at training your staff. There's great certifications from the major cloud platforms out there. The role of DevOps and DevSecOps that we spoke about are really important. And really to get educated on the various tools when it comes to developer productivity and security that the cloud platforms offer.
And Elizabeth?
I think we've got a great opportunity now because the world has, widely adopted the cloud, and I think every organisation has probably got real enthusiasts who want to help the organisation go cloud, especially generation X, Y, Z. So I think it's about using. We know the technology can do it. Now we need to get the organisation to train, develop skills, and kind of encourage people to move in that direction.
And Peter?
And I'd echo exactly what the other two people have already said. I think this is around moving towards a generalist organization. So, in the past, you would have had an infrastructure organization, you'd have had an application development organization. What the cloud is doing is it's taking over some of the responsibilities of certain parts of the organization, but moving the others much closer to the infrastructure. So it's important as part of the sort of coaching and training that we're providing, is that we're starting to change people from you not just being a software developer, but you understand the platform that you're running on, you understand the networking that's being used, you understand identity management, you understand security. All of those things have to work together. So I think, just to echo what everybody else has said, it's a learning experience, and it's a rounding of skills to fully understand the platforms as well.
That's brilliant. So I'd like to say thank you to our panel for sharing us their insights, and to Ditto for bringing this event to market. To find out more about Ditto and the services they provide, please visit ditto.tv. This session has been recorded, and a link to that video will be shared via email. For more information, a copy of today's slides, or to discuss any of the topics covered, please get in touch with Ditto on control@ditto.tv. On screen now, you will see other panels and events that have been happening throughout the day. The official charity for TechCity Connect is Mind, a charity that ensures no one has to face a mental health problem alone. TechCity Connect is a free event featuring people giving up their time to share knowledge and insight. Anything you can donate would be highly appreciated to make a big difference. Please go to ditto.tv/mind to donate. And please visit ditto.tv/TCC straight after this webinar ends for a digital hangout with our panel moderators and other audience members. Until then, just to say thank you very much for attending.